Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind2Mind. I'm Tiffani Neilson, and with me is my co host, Dr. Joe Perez. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
Hello, Tiffany. I'm doing great, thanks. I hope you are too, ma'am.
Absolutely. And today's topic is staying connected. And with the world today, it couldn't have come at a better time for this topic. And so, to get things started, Dr. Joe, do you have any exciting updates to share with us?
Yes, I do. So there's a lot happening. I fly to Orlando next week to give the closing keynote at the ProcureCon East Conference. A couple more weeks after that, I'll be flying to Australia to speak at the NDC Sydney Conference. First time ever. So, yeah, the next few weeks will be extremely busy for me. And of course, Tiffany, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the great honor that IoT marketing has bestowed on my person by giving me, or rather inviting me, to give the keynote for the Summit of Things at the end of October. I'm really, really looking forward to that. What's happening
We're
with you,
honored to
Tiffany?
have you join us. We are definitely honored to have you join us, Dr. Joe.
You're very kind.
Well, definitely have my hands full preparing for Summit of Things. We already have 18 plus speakers and more getting added every day. So that is amazing. We're so happy to have all of our speakers present, and we hope that the audience will be present too. So get your tickets now, iotmktg.com. A little plug there.
Yep.
Since Industry Insights Webinars and IoT Marketing is the one that produces this broadcast, we're happy to give them a mention there. And we're very excited about the performance of our webinars. We've had 2,000 plus at all of our webinars for the past several months. So that's very exciting. And then I'll also be moderating the What's Hot in the Connected World panel during Mobile World
Ooh.
Congress Las Vegas at the end of September. So that's exciting. And I was also named top 10 inspiring leaders of 2022. So thank
Top
you.
one in my book.
Oh, stop, Dr. Joe. Thank you. And so to start things off, let's discuss why this topic is so important. Dr. Joe,
Yeah.
why do you feel it's important to stay connected with others?
So that's an excellent question, Tiffany. I appreciate you asking me. See, I believe that as humans, we are by nature social creatures, aren't we? We're a gregarious society, a gregarious people, and contact with others is essential for our well-being in a number of different ways. In fact, in an article published this past February, the World Council of Health mentions several key aspects. Okay, first, biologically, we acknowledge the connections to our ancestors, for instance, and how certain characteristics are passed down from generation to generation in our personality as well as in our genetics and characteristics. Okay, then there's cognitively, right? Our mental skills are honed and improved as we engage and interact with other people and as we develop better social skills in doing that. Physically, well, we we already know that the human touch can be a very positive thing. And we're told by medical experts that beneficial hormones like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and so forth, others are released just from a warm hug or even something as simple as a handshake. And then there's the emotional and spiritual side of things, in which people who have been through similar situations, similar trials, tribulations, troubles, or even good experience, whatever, we all seem to share a common bond of understanding, sort of like a common unspoken language that allows us to both sympathize and empathize with our fellow man. It's both give and take. So, connections, well, they are both essential and vital to make it happen and to keep us going. Now, on the flip side, the lack of connections with others, it is pretty destructive. As a matter of fact, I read an article that the American Heart Association reported just last month, as a matter of fact, that social isolation and loneliness may increase the risk of having or dying from either a heart attack or a stroke. So you can definitely see why I think human connection is both vital and essential. Now, what do you think about this, Tiffany?
Well, Dr. Joe, that message definitely rings home for me. As last year we lost my beloved grandmother Nana, and it's sad because prior to the pandemic, she had a big house and she had neighbors to communicate with, and she had some neighborhood cats that she fed, which two were her friends. And we all knew that the house was too big for her. And she put up a fight
Mm.
and wanted to stay there. It's been her house her entire adult life. But after a lot of convincing, she listened to our advice and she decided to move into an elderly care facility. And we thought it would be a good idea. She'd have her neighbors to chat with, she'd have Bible studies and pizza parties and even movie nights. But and at first, I have to tell you, it seemed like a good idea. But before too long, it was clear that the pandemic was on the way and things were about to change. And there were no more
Mm.
movie nights, there were no more pizza parties, no more Bible studies, and the stay in place orders were put in place, and she was no longer able to communicate, and even visiting restrictions were placed, and
Wow.
she ended up passing away, and it was so sad. It was not even a year into the pandemic. She was just so lonely and depressed, and
Mm.
yeah, I hated to see that happen. And if I don't know if she would have lasted longer, if there still would have been that connection that she had with her neighbors and fellow people in the building and with our family. But it was really sad. So I can definitely relate
Yeah.
to your message there, Dr. Joe.
Yeah, I'm
But
so sorry to hear that.
thank you. And next, let's talk about forming a connection. Dr. Joe, what
Mm.
are some ways that you connect with others? And can you maybe give some advice on how to connect with others?
Sure. Well, I don't know that I would ever consider myself an expert, but let me tell you, uh, expert or not, this is something I really do enjoy, actually. Meeting people, okay, both virtually and in person. Now, granted, this this is easier for some people and more challenging for others. But regardless of your personality type, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or somewhere in between, the most important thing to remember, at least in my opinion, um, is for me to be more interested in the other person, the one I'm meeting, than I am about myself. Okay, and that's especially that seems to be true. If it's somebody that you've just met, right? Go ahead and get their name. Not only get their name, but also say their name several times. Remember their name. Okay, a name is how you identify yourself, is it not? So, as much as I like it when people remember my name, well, then I need to put myself in the other person's shoes and imagine that they would also like to remember us to remember the same thing. Okay. Another thing, make eye contact. Okay, in the same way that your name identifies you, yourself, your eyes identify your soul. They're the window into your soul. And looking into the other person's eyes shows that you are interested in them. You're not only paying attention to the things that they're saying, the words that they're saying, but also the mood that they're conveying. And to the extent that you can get into sync with that mood and identify with that other person, well, that's the extent to which you can make a connection. That's the extent to which that connection can be a good one, right? Finding common ground, finding common interests. Those things are going to lengthen those connections and strengthen those bonds. Now, as for me, as a Christian, I try to follow biblical principles. I'm not always successful, but one in particular is called the Golden Rule. It's in many faiths, right? And it's been expressed in a multitude of different ways. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. The principle of treating other people the way you would like to be treated yourself. Okay. The other one is a verse that I read in Proverbs that wise King Solomon said, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly." You know, I really cannot expect somebody else to respond in a friendly way to me if I myself am not being kind and friendly to them first. Okay. But as to this bond, the strengthening of the bond, not everybody that you meet, after all, they're not all going to be your lifelong friend, granted. but at least we should try to show some interest and empathy to the other person. Because, hey, you never know when you're going to lift someone's spirits and brighten someone's day. And sometimes, unfortunately, people do the opposite, right? I'd rather lift somebody's spirit and brighten somebody's day than to crush somebody's spirit and ruin somebody's day and contribute to their being in the dumps. Now, while you're doing all that, be genuine, be real. Nothing is worse than a phony. And if this fakeness, whatever you want to, I don't know if that's a word, but if this fakeness is observed or noticed, as humans, we tend to put up defensive walls when we see that. And you know what? It's kind of hard for me to connect with somebody if there's a wall between us, and even harder. Okay, even worse than that. When I myself learn that I'm the one that made the wall come up in the first place by not being genuine and real with them. What's your take on that, Tiffany?
Well, I think you brought up some great points, Dr. Joe. But I also feel that forming a connection can start with something as simple and kind as a smile. I mean, there's plenty of times that
Yes.
you're walking down the street and you just smile at someone, or in the grocery store and you say, "Hey, how's your day going?" And they just look at you like no one's ever asked them that
Right.
before, because maybe no one has. And it also starts with asking questions and then actually listening to what they have to say, because a lot of
Yes.
times people might ask, but maybe they don't listen. So I think it has to be that connection where it is communication and it's a two-way communication. So I think that that's important. But I also think the fact that you brought up being genuine and caring when you're forming a connection is super important. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Dr. Joe. And I also feel
Yes,
that
ma'am.
if you're talking with someone, find commonalities, find common ground you can connect on. Whether that's you both like the same movies or the same food or whatever it might be, but just try to find commonalities and form a connection from there. So that would be some of my advice. But
Agree 100%.
you also brought up some other good points, Dr. Joe. So what if there is something or someone that you don't want to form a connection with? What do you do then?
Ugh, ugh. Oh gosh, I was afraid of that. Well, okay, let me say it this way. Will Rogers, American actor in the early 1900s, has famously been quoted as saying, "I never met a man that I didn't like." Now, I don't know if I said it, if I sounded anything like him or not. I don't know what he sounded like, but yeah, I think that's a pretty decent attitude to have. Okay, and it's a good goal to strive for. That you never met somebody you didn't like. Always, always, always trying to look for the good in people, not the bad. Not jumping to conclusions, not thinking the worst of somebody, not turning somebody away just because they might be a little different. That's crazy. Not judging somebody. Yeah, I don't know, only based on some quick superficial observation. Okay? And with that said, however, sometimes there are connections that might not be in your best interest to form. I give you some examples from social media, especially. All right, ever since I opened my speaker account on Facebook, I have received hundreds of friend requests. I think I've only accepted maybe a few dozen. I'm not as active on Facebook as I am on LinkedIn, but when I look at their Facebook page, profile, whatever you call it, when the profile picture itself looks like it's been doctored up, okay, or it looks like 15 other people I've seen are on some alarmy place or whatnot, they pop up out of nowhere. They write a note trying to sell me something, or worse than that, they might put inappropriate comments in the notes. Say, "Honey, can you look at this, please?" I mean, you don't have to be ugly right back to them or whatever. Just, hey, hit the ignore button. Boom, right? Take it away. It's gone. Okay. I think that should be even more so on LinkedIn, the more professional network. All right, if you're maybe you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, so I ask, do you want to interact with me and have a conversation? Are you looking for collaboration, mutual enrichment? Do you have a passion for education or data or personal integrity or professional development or any of the other things that you might see on my profile? Or by contrast, are you just looking for somebody that you can hawk your wares to? Yeah. Is the only thing you want is a chance for me to hire all your programmers and developers from some country or whatnot? You want me to buy into your crypto scheme or sell your vacuum cleaners or whatever? Okay, look, just because I have more than 14,000 LinkedIn followers does not mean that I'm going to accept every connection request I get. I'm not too keen on these people that come up with a sales pitch right off the bat without even giving us a chance for some interaction or have some kind of dialogue or conversation first. How do you see the same thing, Tiffany?
Well, while I try to be open minded and avoid stereotyping and
Right,
putting people in boxes per se, it's pretty obvious to everyone on the planet that not everyone is going to have your best intentions in mind.
right,
And with that being said, some of those intentions might be malicious or harmful. And so while we refer to these people as maybe frenemies, they pretend to be your friend, but they're actually your enemy. Not everyone's like that. And you can't stereotype people and you can't think that
yes,
everyone's out to get you. You have to give people a chance, but you have to know what you want and do not want to connect with. And, when you're forming a connection with others, you're going to find out sooner or later what their true intentions are. And it might be for the
right,
good and it might be for the bad, but you have to take it for what it is with a grain of salt, if you will, and move on. And if one connection's not right for you, go form another connection, but don't let one bad connection ruin your connection altogether. And
exactly.
so, what about connecting with an audience, Dr. Joe? Because considering you're an international speaker, I mean, you're going to Australia. You just got back from,
Yeah.
I can't even list off all the places that you've been this year, but it's very impressive. So, what are some tips or ways that you engage with an audience?
Well, you're very kind to say that, Tiffany. You give a monkey, you give a trained monkey a hammer, and sooner or later that monkey's going to figure out what that hammer's for. I've been at this long enough that I finally figured out what the hammer's for. So, and I'd like to think that maybe I'm a little bit smarter than a monkey, but whatever. Uh, I'm glad you asked though, because you're touching on my biggest passion here is not only connecting with people, but connecting with my audience. Now, some of our viewers may already know that I was an educator for 10 years before I got into my IT career. And in many ways, I still kind of consider myself to be an educator to this day. See, because I still approach everything with an educator's mindset, right? I mean, it should be obvious that you are not going to teach math to a fifth grader, for instance, as you would to junior in college, right? Now, as a speaker, how do I apply? Why should I treat my audience any differently? Okay, there's a different mindset, for instance, when you're in front of a group of developers than there is when you're in a room full of educators or members of the C-suite or the HR professionals or compliance specialists or anybody else. Okay, take the size of the crowd into consideration. Is it a big one or a small one? What's the mood? What is the theme of the conference? What is the lighting like? All of those things have to be taken into account. So with that in mind, the very first thing I do, I try to key into the different types of body languages that you're going to see in different crowds. Are they smiling? Are they frowning? Be observant. Notice what clicks with them versus what doesn't. Have situational awareness when you're on the stage. Okay? Be able to gauge the mood of the crowd. For instance, if I see a bunch of people that are frowning with, some other body language like this, it indicates that they don't agree with or disapprove of what I'm saying. I might say something like, you know, it looks like some of you might disagree, and that's okay. Let me tell you why I see it differently. And then boom, 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 go on from there. Okay. Here's my point in saying that noticing and acknowledging people's concerns goes a long way towards winning them over. And I don't necessarily mean making them change their opinion, but at least making them see that I can see their side. Would you like to see my side? Let's continue the dialogue. And they're going to be more interested in what I have to say. Okay. Something else I do, I start my presentation with a story, any kind of story. This both piques their interest and it also gives them something that's relatable. You think about it, ever since we were little kids, I suppose we all learned best by hearing things in story form, right? And again, having been an educator, I already know this. So I try to apply it as much as I can when I speak. Now, if story happens to be, from your own personal experience, well, then that can help create a relatable bond between me and the audience, thus breaking down any of those walls that might still be present we talked about earlier. Also, and just like the conversations that we were talking about earlier, um, I make eye contact with them, right? In the same way as a conversation, the eyes are the window to the soul, we said. Okay, so the more people with whom I can individually make specific eye contact as I go around the room, okay, the more of what I call snippets of personal connection I can make. The eye contact, okay? You wanna make it long enough to make a connection, maybe even long enough to get a smile, as you said so eloquently, smiles are contagious. But don't stare because, that might get a little creepy, if you stare at them too long. And again, smile while you're doing it. Another thing, the whole methodology behind every presentation. I'm talking when I'm constructing the presentation structure itself, my topic, my approach, my outline, my slides, and so forth. It involves starting with the known to get to the unknown. In other words, if I'm presenting a difficult aspect of a topic, one that may not be so well known, for instance, okay, I might just start off with something that's already familiar to them, maybe an analogy of some sort, and then proceed from there, from the known to the unknown, bridging that gap between the known and the unknown, but in any case, always starting with the known. Here's where an object lesson can help. Okay. Also, the more senses that I involve in my presentation, the more connection points that I make. Okay, they have something that they hear. I'm talking to them. They have something that they see. The piece of paper that's got some fill in the blank notes. Okay, right? Notes that they can take. Okay, object lesson. Okay, it makes noise, something they see, they hear, they feel, they touch. The more of those connection points that I've made, okay, then the more profound those connections are going to be, then the greater the likelihood that they're going to retain what I talked about when it's all over with. And for that reason, I include the asking of questions, a little bit of back and forth banter, like the banter you and I have, right? And a little reward when they get the question right. I've been known to throw candy at the audience too. Yeah, that's always helpful. You'll see that in some of my videos. And while I'm at it, I'm going to compliment the audience from time to time. At the end, I'll thank them for listening to me. At the beginning, I thank them. And I don't make them think that I am smarter than they are. If I'm going to say something profound, I might say something like, well, you may already know this, but dot, 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 go on from there. Okay. Never assume that I'm any smarter. I talked about body language earlier. Part of that, get out from behind the podium, walking around on the stage. Be confident enough in yourself and your demeanor, in your rapport, in your command of the topic you're speaking about that you do not hide behind that podium. The podium is a barrier. What you're trying to do is bring down barriers, not erect them up. Get out from behind that podium, walking onto the stage. In fact, walking out and even towards the audience a bit. What are you doing? By doing so, you're breaking down any physical or psychological barrier. Okay, the more barriers I bring down, the more bridges I can build up. And in doing that, the more connections I make, and the more that they will want to hear from me in the end. Hopefully, well, that's going to bring them back to hear me the next time, or better yet, it'll bring the organizers to ask me to speak again next time around. That's how I see it. What's your take on this, Tiffani?
Well, I love all of the examples that you gave, Dr. Joe. I think that that was a great rundown of all the different ways that you can engage with an audience. And I hear all those things, and one word just is loud as day in my mind, and it's experience. Because each one
Yeah.
of those things that you did is create an experience with your audience that they're going to remember. And that way they're
Yes.
engaged, which is amazing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yes, Dr. Joe, eye contact, eye contact, eye contact. It's
Right.
so
Right.
important because you're going to know right away, hey, if someone's on their phone, if they're sleeping, they're obviously not into what you're saying. So I think that those are great points. And also,
Uh,
oh, Dr. Joe, no,
sorry,
and
I'm
also
teasing. Go ahead.
and also make sure that they can hear you. If you're speaking at an event and you have a microphone, tap it and make sure that it's on. Make sure that they're going to be able to hear you before you go delivering the message. One, but all these things are great for in-person events. But for me, with Industry Insights webinars, it's a little tougher because I'm doing this virtually, and the whole virtual events comes with a whole nother slew of challenges because I don't know if they're looking at me or not. They could be looking at anything. They could be watching something else altogether, reading in something online. I have no idea. But the more that you're engaging them in any way, shape, or form, and that's engaging them via questions, polls, just try and get the chat going. Because if the chat's hot, and you see that there's a lot of messages in there, then you know that they're engaged if they're asking questions.
Yep.
But if they're not, how do you actually reel them back in? How do you know that they're still there? And so it's an ongoing challenge. But the more that you can get feedback from them, get them engaged in the conversation, and if that's not an option, at least engage the other panelists and the person that you're speaking
Right.
to, if that's an option, so that you have somebody engaged, in which case more people will become engaged. So that's just a few thoughts there. And also bringing humor into the conversation. I love that you're throwing candy, Dr. Joe, whatever it takes.
You got it.
And also, like you said, acknowledging that other people may not have the same opinions of you as you, and
Hmm.
being respectful of that and acknowledging it and moving forward in the conversation. So I think you brought up some great points there, Dr. Joe.
Thank you, ma'am.
And as many students are returning to school after summer break, how do you feel that students are adapting with their and connecting with their studies and with other students?
Great question, Tiffany. Students are very adaptable. People connect in different ways. Needs and goals are going to change depending upon the age group of the students. So it'll be a little bit of a different picture, whether you're talking about elementary students, high school students, or college students. Again, harkening back to my own days as a full-time educator, uh, I'll elaborate briefly on this. To be honest, my experience is a little bit skewed because I taught high school nearly every year, and only 1 year did I teach older elementary students. So my experience is most from that perspective. But I have found that kids thrive on structure. That is, they need boundaries to help them feel more secure, some more than others, some less than others. As they get older and as they mature, those boundaries adopt more flexibility, and the need for more external security upon them decreases as they themselves become more secure. That is, more comfortable in their own skin, as it were. All right. There are indeed more boundaries, more structure during the school year than what they typically may have during the summertime. So I believe that the adjustment from the free flowing summer to the discipline of schoolwork is a bit more challenging for the younger kids than it is for the older ones. As they mature, they develop more discipline on their own, right? And can get back into things a little more easily. They don't need as much external push to discipline as they do themselves pushing themselves. They've learned that from experience. Now, I know I'm painting with a pretty broad brush here. Okay, there are exceptions, right? It's going to depend upon the personality of the students, the maturity, the home life, the upbringing, the kind of school that they're in, the quality of the education that they're receiving, and the circumstances and what their summer environment was like. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, summer is the time for fun, excitement, activity, trips with the family where it's possible, summer camp if they can tolerate it, all kinds of other things going on. But here's the thing, if parents can get involved with their kids, especially the younger ones and the older ones too, fun activities, games that exercise their minds, it can make that transition a little bit easier for them. Harkening back to what I said earlier about being real, because that's what we need, right? To keep in mind as we're doing all this, to be real, to be genuine in front of the kids and to the kids and for the kids. In a 2017 Consumer Contents Report survey of more than 2,000 adults in the US, the UK, and Australia, I believe, it was found that 86% of the people value authenticity above any other factor in deciding the different brands that they're going to support, that they're going to like. And about 70% of the time, they are able to tell whether they're being faked out or not. Okay. Now, here's the other interesting twist of all these numbers. The overwhelming majority of them are millennials. So the emphasis on young people. All right. So, do all these things come into play when evaluating how difficult or easy this transition is going to be from summer to school? Most definitely. But bottom line, I believe it's up to us, parents, educators, and interested parties to do everything that we can to ease that transition, both for the students and for those who teach and care for them. How about you, Tiffany? How do you see it?
Well, I would agree with you greatly, Dr. Joe.
Yeah.
And studies by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, find that children's emergency department visits increased during the pandemic and for mental
Mm,
health related emergencies and suspected suicide attempts. And this is between
wow.
children ages 12 to 17. And I'm really not surprised. I mean, it was a shocking and scary time for everyone. But at the same
Yeah.
time, mental health service utilization declined as well. And research has shown that as economic conditions worsen, children's mental health is getting negatively impacted. And parents with young children reported in October and November of 2020 that their children showed elevated symptoms of depression, anxiety, and psychological stress, and 22% experienced overall worsened mental or emotional health. And with that being said, I feel that students today are returning to school, and there are a countless number of health, social, economical, and even political uncertainties that surround that. And so
Yeah.
having the support of their family, as you mentioned, is so vital to their success and and adapting to our changing world. And as our world continues to become digital first, I feel that it's important to connect both on and offline. And the more students can participate in activities like sports or 4-H or any other activities with others, I think that they're going to have that much more of a better chance at success. But adults are also facing challenges. I mean, there's everyone's kind of
Hmm.
adjusting to going back to the office. Ugh, and they're putting up a fight over it. No, but it's a struggle because it's such a shift from what we've been doing. And while virtual work has its benefits, being back at the office has its benefits too, of being around your team, group collaboration, and working together as a team. I think that it's both sides of the coin. And for me, I'm excited to go back to trade shows and the
Yeah.
virtual, they're great, but going back, there's nothing better than shaking someone's hand, and that to
Yes.
me is forming a true connection that's memorable, that's going to be a lasting connection with someone. So, I mean, it's got its pros and cons, but I think going back to school, going back to the office, these are all things that are important and they're vital and getting our connections back on the right track. And I mean, I remember the first time that I met David Knight, one of our previous panelists, in person, and he was shocked for the first couple minutes I was actually a real person. So it definitely is something getting used to. But we can do it. We can get back to normal if we all work on this together. But do you
Right.
feel that it's easier or more difficult to form a connection with so many options available to connect to people now?
There are a lot of options. Yeah. Wow. And Tiffany, if I may say before I start, you hit the nail on the head. That was so eloquently put. I love the way you said that, and I appreciate your comments. But to answer your question, you know, I might have to put on my technical professional's hat, and I'm going to have to answer it in the same way any person in the IT world would answer it. Are you ready? It depends. Oh, don't you hate it when people do that, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, Before our viewers start throwing virtual tomatoes at me, I'm going to qualify that answer. All right. It does depend. See, because you see, sometimes it's more difficult, but I kind of think more often it's easier. And let me tell you what I mean by that on a digital level. It's easier in that I can speak to and see people. I say that in air quotes, people from all over the world and have meaningful dialogue with these people all over the world by just a few simple clicks of a button and looking into a webcam. And that increases increases the probability for quantity, but it does not necessarily imply an equal increase of quality, right? Because in that sense, when you take that into consideration, the quantity versus the quality, that's where it becomes more difficult because you see, the easy thing to do is to click that out connect button on the outgoing side and mindlessly click the accept button on the incoming side without taking anything into consideration. So, as I mentioned earlier, and you also eloquently put, I'm going to scrutinize my incoming connection requests and not just blindly accept them. Yes, I'm going to take all things into consideration and I'm not going to judge and that kind of thing, but I am going to scrutinize and make sure I get quality connections. Now, on the outgoing side, well, I'm going to take the time to write a thoughtful note when I send that request. And the challenge there, you only got 300 characters. Thanks a lot, LinkedIn. No, but seriously, seriously, having to stop and think of exactly what to say, right? And fit it into what 300 characters, and looking at that other person's profile and checking out their posts, right? And look at their other connections, unless they don't make them visible. That takes time. You know what? It should take time because connections matter, especially if you want to make a real connection, a quality connection, quality over quantity. What do you think about that, Tiffany?
Yes, Dr. Joe. Quality over quantity for sure. And I think that a good example would be, there are so many Zoom sessions or, virtual meetings that you could fit into your day. But if you're local and in the same town as someone and you have the option to choose a actual coffee with them, go for the coffee, go for the in
Yes,
person, take chance on it and make time for it because quality over quantity. And you said it so well. And I think that that's so important because when there were no other options, sure, virtual meetings, no
yes,
problem. But
no choice.
no other choice. But because we
Right.
all experience this global disconnection, and if it wasn't for virtual meetings, then we would really be disconnected. So you got to work with what you have. But Dr. Joe, the pandemic affected us all. But how do you
Yes.
see it's impacted connecting with others for you?
Oh wow. Huge, huge impact. Um, a huge impact indeed, Tiffany. Absolutely. As I alluded to earlier, okay, we're social creatures, right? You so eloquently put it. Yeah, we need the physical contact. We need interaction with other humanoid life forms. Some might need it more of extent than others, and some to less of an extent to others. But one way or another, we all need it. And when the expression social distancing suddenly became a part of our collective vocabulary, people withdrew. Now, people who weren't already all that comfortable being around people in the first place, they likely tended to withdraw even further, not only socially, but within themselves, into, I don't know, almost like a shell. See, the more you withdraw from outside contact, the greater the danger for issues such as loneliness, as you mentioned, and depression, as you mentioned, can sit in. And to that point, a 2020 survey of more than 10,000 adults by a U.S. healthcare insurer, I think it was Cigna, it revealed an almost 13% increase in perceived loneliness since 2018, with nearly two-thirds of those surveyed, like 60 something percent, indicating that they experienced loneliness themselves. It also showed that as a result, more than half of them felt they did not have a good work life balance. And not only that, they experienced decreased productivity at work because of it. Okay, the big domino effect we see here, right? Now, of course, throughout history, there have always been lonely people. We don't deny that, right? Pandemic or no pandemic. But I can't help but think that the disruption caused by this pandemic, at the very least, was a contributing cause, maybe even a major significant cause. See, even with the passing of the worst of the pandemic, and at least I hope we can say the worst of it behind us, right? I have seen how this pent up demand for in person gatherings has resulted in huge upswings in the attendance and the number of conferences and other in person trade shows that you mentioned, the ones that are being offered. Sure, that's great for speakers who love the opportunity, for people who love the opportunity. We're creating value in front of a live audience for people to get out and enjoy each other's company. We need that. I can only hope that we will continue, though continue to reach out to those who might still hesitate to get out and about. and recognize that they need contact. They need encouragement too. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Tiffany.
Well, Dr. Joe, you brought up so many good points that I'd love to touch on all of them. But the one I want to start with is the social distancing, because it's like
Yeah.
people heard the term and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't socialize. I got to distance myself from everything and everyone. And they like didn't make phone calls. They didn't want to talk
Yep.
to other people. It's like their minds were just triggered by fear. And it's fear of getting
Yes.
sick. It's fear of communicating with others. It's fear of socializing. It's fear of so many things that, and it's just been increasing and increasing. Finally, I think we're starting to get ahead of it and things are starting to get better. But I mean, for a long time, people were just afraid. That was like the go-to
Right.
state of being afraid, and it caused this social anxiety. So, I mean, yes, the pandemic definitely played a significant role in the way that we communicate with others. And while it's important to wash your hands, keep your distance a little bit, especially if you're under the weather, stay home. But if you're not, don't be afraid to go outside. And even if you're not going
Yes.
outside, pick up the phone, make a call, text someone, send an email, send a card. There's lots of ways to connect with people
That's
besides
right.
actually, being in person. But if you have the option, go be in person. Go out and do something fun. And that's what I
Right.
really feel is going to take us to the next level, because for me, my deepest connections are formed when I have an experience, just as we mentioned a few minutes ago. And whether that's experiencing something because I'm connecting with it because it's a cause I agree with or information that I like, just go out and have more experiences, because that is what's going to get this thing back in check. So open yourself up.
Yes.
Don't be so afraid. Get over the fear. Things are getting better. Protect yourself, but don't just live in this constant state of fear. And
Amen to
so,
that.
and in closing, the more that we connect to the world, we're going to connect the dots. We're going to be able to make better, more informed decisions. And we're going to be able to make better, more long lasting connections and relationships. So, get over the fear. Things are going to be okay. And is there anything else you'd like to share as we wrap things up, Dr. Joe?
Sure, Tiffany. Again, I thank you for this wonderful conversation that we've had. I enjoy it every time. You are just a jewel in the way you express things, and I'm so grateful and honored. So Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality." Wow. I love that quote, because I think Dr. King really hit the nail on the head with this thing. Okay, look, whether you have 500 LinkedIn followers or 500,000, okay, you are someone. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you do have a sphere of influence. You can make a difference in someone's life. As you consider your connections, be real, stay real, and leave your mark. You never know whose life you're going to touch. So make every day count. And you know what? Smile while you're doing it. Tiffany, back to you.
And in closing, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Joe. Your insights were so valuable, and I'm so happy that we did have this discussion today as well. And to everyone watching, thank you for watching, and stay connected. Stay connected with your family. Don't let a little argument come between you and your family. Be bigger than that. Stay connected. Stay connected to your friends, to your work, to your passions, to your higher power. Stay connected to yourself, and know when it's just time to sit and think. And then how are you going to go and form new connections? And every day is a blessing, so make it one worth living and make the most of it. So thank you for joining us, everyone, and be sure to get your tickets for Summit of Things so that you can hear more from Dr. Joe and I during the live event in this metaverse-like platform. You'll be able to roam around. It's super cool. Get your tickets now at iotmktg.com, and we'll see you at the summit. And until next time, get connected, stay connected. Thank you so much, Dr. Joe, for joining me today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.